Brian was a friend, and he was supposed to be doing Sisters and Phantom of the Paradise. He had just gone through an experience with Get to Know Your Rabbit, which was very unhappy. So he said, "Can you get me out of this?" We'd been friends in New York during his very early independent films. We read both scripts, and I was most eager to do Phantom. But Brian convinced us to do Sisters first, but Phantom was, to me, the treasure that I wanted to do, but we did Sisters first, and I think Phantom seemed so original and, for us, ambitious, and I remember after Sisters, he brought me a book called Carrie, and I said, it's been done already. Phantom's the one I wanted to do, and I turned down Carrie. But I think it was its originality and its sense of humor.
Life! But I'm innocent! Swan stole my music and framed me!
We had done Sisters and sold it to Sam Arkoff at AIP, and it was a successful movie, particularly because of the drive-in success. And we started developing Phantom with AIP, and then the budget we had at the last minute was cut by like $5 million from what we thought AIP would do it for, and Brian and I said we can't do it. So they were using our money from Sisters to pay for our pre-production on Phantom, so they thought they had us in a squeeze. And my mother had just been engaged to her third husband, who was friends with Gus Byrne. And we went to an engagement party at my mom's house, and I told Gus about this terrible predicament we were in. We were starting pre-production. They were using our own money, and then they were cutting our budget, which was far below what we could afford to make it for. So he said, "Let me get back to you." And he got together with Gabe Katska, who was his partner in a film production company. And the next day, Gabe had checked out Brian and us, and Gus said, "We'll finance Phantom." So that it was like a miracle that we were able to find a solution to making the film in the first place because of this chance encounter with Katska and Byrne. The Phantom was pretty inclusive. We were financing the film. We were using our family's toy factory to shoot the film, and we were present throughout the shooting in Dallas and New York, and a time which I enjoy the most, when I'm most involved. It's easy to be removed and be more an executive, but at that time I was very integral in the process. A person who was never recognized for her help in making the film was my mother, Lynn Pressman, because Lynn Pressman ran Pressman Toy Company, my family toy company, and she allowed and encouraged us to use the factory for the prison scene and the scene in the record pressing plant. There was a moment of terror when the machine seemed to be actually almost crushing Bill's head. Actually had an incorrect setting. Fortunately, it didn't. But Lynn's help in letting us use the factory for the prison scene and for that record scene, and generally helping us finance the movie with the help of Gus Byrne and Gabe Katska. I think if there was one person who was I've never really recognized for help in this movie, was Lynn. And we had a lot of the same people from Sisters and Badlands that were made just prior involved. Sissy Spacek and Jack Fisk, and a lot of the team, Lou Stroller, a number of people who were integral to that period. Those three films, Sisters, Badlands, and Phantom, kind of overlapped. We were all young and excited about doing the movie, and we had some problems. I remember the Teamsters got on our case, and my friend at the lab was actually dealing with the unions behind my back, and there were things going on that we were learning about how to make movies within a corporate space, but we were pretty innocent and pretty enthusiastic about the moment.
Half asleep, I hear a voice.
Brian enjoyed his own work. He was very, when something worked, he was very exuberant and full of laughter. But yes, he was a very good editor and developed Paul Hirsch, who went on to edit Star Wars and other great movies, and that was our editor on Sisters and Phantom, and he had a great talent for editing.
Wonder what's become of.
When Fox saw the finished film, they liked it, and that was the difference between just considering it as a screenplay and seeing it as a finished movie. Remember when Fox bought it, it wasn't a horror film, it was a horror film, it was a musical, it was a comedy, it was several different genres in one. I remember I was, for some reason, in a room at the Westbury Hotel in New York on Madison Avenue, and getting a call from Gordon Stolberg, who was the head of Fox, reporting the first weekend's results and being very disappointed, and just finding out then that the film wasn't going to be the smash hit that we hoped it would be. We had concerns about the marketing campaign, still hoped against hope that it would do well, but it was not the cool campaign that we thought matched the movie. It was playing to a kind of teeny bopper idea of what the audience would be. What happened was Rocky Horror Picture Show became successful in its re-release, and so we tried to do the same thing with Phantom, and we did our own campaign and re-released Phantom, and I think the film was better regarded in the re-release than the first. So that's where I guess the connection with Rocky Horror Picture Show came in its success as a re-release.
Out of the heart-stopping history of horror, Caligari, Frankenstein, King Kong, and now, Phantom of the Paradise. They crushed his face, destroyed his voice, but they couldn't keep him from the woman he loved. From 20th Century Fox.
I remember when Fox bought it, we had the unfortunate experience of finding out that the record company on the label that was in the film was Swan Song, which was Led Zeppelin's, so we had to change way before CGI and computers made such changes easy to replace Swan Song with Death Records. Our office committed the most fundamental blunder a film company can do. And I remember the thunderstruck fact that when the lawsuits hit, I went to Norman Levine, our insurance broker, and said, well, we have our E&O policy to cover all this. And he said, sorry to say, you never signed it. It was we actually never had the insurance that a film has to have in making a movie. And that was one of the biggest blunders of my film career. The fact that there were legal claims on most films that are finished would not be such a problem if the insurance had been there. So that's what made us really have to hustle. And Universal sued us for plagiarizing Phantom of the Opera. And our legal advice was that this was a parody, and therefore we were not vulnerable to such a claim. But Fox said, you may be right, but we don't have time to prove you're right, and you have to settle it and pay Universal before we're going to release this picture. So we were even though we were legally in a I think the right position, Fox wasn't ready to let us fight the battle. So we had to settle that. So between the fact that we didn't have E&O insurance on the Swan Song issue, and Universal was claiming this issue that Fox didn't want to fight, we had to settle both. At the time, the sale of Phantom for an independent film was unprecedented. It was like a big deal to get $1 million and $2 million. At that time, independent films were quite a rarity. I think Paul Williams, who's become a great friend and is a great artist, at the time was like the most prominent name involved with the movie. He had written major successes for illustrious musicians, and I think the marketing emphasized his involvement in a way that kind of diffused the idea of what the movie was. And it's interesting, the Fox campaign was an adolescent approach, which in retrospect is interesting because a lot of the fans today who are most ardent were adolescent at the time and were young kids, and they are great fans today, but the audience was very limited when the film came out, and it took a second release with a bit more sophisticated campaign for the film to I think establish its reputation. There was a campaign that tried to make it a straight horror movie, and then there was I think the original campaign was kind of unclear and diffuse because it had so many different elements that it didn't make clear what the focus was. The one we came up with was by Richard Corbin, which was more like the comic book films we see today. It was, I think, in that sense, ahead of its time. It was a very super real idea of what the film was, which is what I think what the film is. It's a comic book of a movie. We went to we started in Little Rock, Arkansas, which was the smallest kind of major market where you could buy TV time and put it out there and be an important film in the marketplace, which would be very difficult to do today. But at that time, we, with our own resources, re-released Badlands, and the same with Phantom at Little Rock first. Then we went to Memphis, and then we went to Dallas. And once the films were successful in Dallas, the studios were sold on the idea of re-releasing the film more generally. And so that we followed that same pattern with Phantom. It was a good educational experience, and marketing, did our own trailer.
From 20th Century Fox, the most highly acclaimed horror fantasy of our time, Phantom of the Paradise, rated PG.
Jack Shoulder and a guy named Paul Gurian, if I remember correctly, were two filmmakers. Jack went on to direct other films, but at that time they were doing trailers, and we worked together and created the trailer that was used, and the commercial that we used for the TV campaign for Phantom, and it worked better. The film actually did business the second time around. We called it the greatest fantasy of our time. I don't know. We built it up to be something really good and special, and we were proud of it. And we all know advertising can overcome a lot of issues by just spending money in the marketplace and having the film front and center with and Phantom had so much great stuff to use visually to play with. The original title Brian had was Phantom of the Fillmore, but Bill Graham would not give us the rights to use that title. The idea of calling it just Phantom sounds like that could have been an interim step. So we then changed it to Phantom of the Paradise, which was a movie theater up in the Bronx. There was a famous movie theater called the Paradise, which is what that's why we named it the Paradise. There was a theater uptown called the Paradise. I think the thing that marketed films then as it is today, or until recently, it was television. There is what we did on the re-release of Phantom was advertise the film on television in a very saturated way, and opened in quite a few theaters. It wasn't handled as an art film. It was handled as a commercial mainstream movie, and that worked. And the poster was changed, the trailer was changed, but I think the biggest change was we spent, at that time maybe it was $30,000, but that was a huge amount of money to spend to open a film in Little Rock, and that's what I think made the difference. It was the intensity of the marketing. I always thought it was a wonderful movie, but I hadn't seen it in a while, and I saw it at the Brooklyn Academy of Music at BAM with a full house maybe a couple of years ago, and it really hit me how it worked and how special it was. The fans seemed to be more centered in France and Spain and in Europe than here. And then when I saw the film at BAM, I really did have a new appreciation for it. That it really worked and was just a great, exuberant film, a great cinematic invention. I take delight in seeing its influence on contemporary culture. Bands like Daft Punk, acknowledge the influence that Phantom had on them.
As I lost control, I swore I'd sell my soul.